If you're in the late stages of your career, you may want to pay attention to this video because I'm noticing a very disturbing trend. And in this video, we're going to break down exactly what it is and how you can potentially avoid it. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brian. I'm the founder of A Life After Layoff. I'm a career strategist, a corporate recruiter, and a former human resources professional. And I've made it my mission to demystify how companies hire, how they promote, and how careers work at major corporations. So if you're interested in this kind of content, make sure you follow along. I've been very fortunate in my career coaching practice to be able to speak to a lot of different people from a lot of different industries, a lot of different organizations, a lot of different job types, levels, etc. And I help them work through career-related challenges and come up with solutions. And I've noticed a relatively new trend in the last couple of years that is becoming much more prevalent, and in particular, it's impacting people who are on the latter part of their career. So I would say people who are in the final third, final quarter. So the scenario typically goes something like this. The person's in their mid-50s to mid-60s. They need about 5 to 7 years before they retire, and they've been at the same company for a long period of time. So it might be 10, 15, 20 years in the same organization. And oftentimes, they had been in the same role for a long period of time as well. This can be a very senior role. I've seen it probably most commonly at manager, senior manager, or director. And because the person's been in this company for a long period of time, they've moved up in rank over the course of a few years till they reached a certain point, and then it looks like their career gets stunted. In a lot of cases, they'll actually create a specific job. Maybe it's for a specific project just to keep the person employed. They know a lot of the senior leaders. They're well regarded in the organization. They're typically a decent performer, but they're often kind of pigeonholed into a certain role. Usually it's because a manager that they were friendly with, maybe their boss or their boss's boss, liked them enough that they didn't want to get rid of them, but they didn't really have a great place to put them, so they kind of fit them into some special project somewhere. And this person is often siloed. They're working on some specific project that's unique to the company, and it's not a job type that's very common across the broader industry. And because the senior leader is supporting them, they've kind of been sheltered from a lot of the fallout of the broader industry. But inevitably what happens is that senior leader or senior leaders who have been protecting this person for whatever reason ends up moving on, whether they retire, whether they find another job and they leave the organization, but then it basically takes away the safety net. A new leader comes on, a new leadership team looks at the organization and starts to wonder, there is this person sitting in this department making at the top end of the range, a healthy salary, and we don't really know what to do with them. And because they don't have the same level of commitment or the established relationships with that person, they find themselves on the layoff list and they're exited from the business. And to their dismay, they find that the open job market is not nearly as hospitable as they once remembered it. Keeping in mind, they probably haven't looked for an active job on the market in maybe a decade or two. So they put together a resume, they start looking for jobs, they even reach out to some people in their small network, and they find crickets. Nobody's returning their calls. People that they used to work with don't seem to have any opportunities for them. They've exhausted all their resources trying to find a job, and they can't get the phone to ring. There's a couple of issues. First issue being that because their job was so siloed, it's not easy to translate that same experience into other organizations. Also, at that senior level, they're at a certain compensation level that can be very healthy, and companies will oftentimes not want to take on somebody who's at the very top of a salary band, especially if their skills aren't perfectly aligned for what they're looking for. And this person also often finds themselves lagging behind the broader market for common skills or experiences or methods of doing business that puts them decidedly behind the rest of the pack. So they're making a lot of money. They have a very high title or big title, and they don't have current skills that the rest of the job market is looking for. So they're really struggling to get the phone to ring. So inevitably what they start doing is they look at lower level positions. They look at jobs that are down at the manager's level, or even some cases, if they get desperate enough, they start looking at the individual contributor level. But the problem remains. They're making a very high salary, they've got a big title, and they're applying to these jobs that are quote unquote beneath them, that they should be in theory well qualified for, but they may actually not even have the right skills for those jobs. So now they're kind of in limbo. And these same hiring teams basically assess them as being overqualified. They don't want to take a risk on a person who has too much experience, too much title, because they'll look at it as a flight risk, that this person won't want to get in the weeds, won't want to take a step backwards, and they'll assign their own story to you. And this can be particularly frustrating because the person who is dealing with this sees these jobs and says, I can do this, I've got all the qualifications and the skills. But the problem is, when you have that higher title and you're in the same job type, maybe it's at, again, a senior director or a director level or senior manager, and you've been in that role for a long period of time, what the market will often look at that as is somebody who has maxed out. They've hit their wall and they are now just at the peak of their career. So you're really very much in this limbo scenario where you can't get a job at your level, you can't go up in level, and you really can't go down in level, and you start to panic and wonder, what the heck can you do? So I've seen people out of desperation make wholesale changes. They want to completely dumb down their resumes. They want to do completely unrelated work. I've seen some people go into like insurance sales, for example, that's completely unrelated. And that basically just guarantees that you're off on a tangent in your career, which probably is the case. The biggest problem that they have is that most of the solutions needed to have been implemented years ago. In other words, they lacked career strategy. They operated with a level of comfort. They got into a very safe bubble. The idea of a steady job is bad for your career. I made another video about that you should check out if you're curious about this more. I'll leave a link for it. But ultimately, if you're in that job type for too long, you're not growing with the market. You're not paying attention to what's going on in the broader market. And if your company is not aggressively adopting the latest and greatest technologies, the methods that the way that they're approaching work, you can find yourself very behind the rest of the market. And when you arrive on the market thinking that you're very marketable, oftentimes the job market has a way of really beating down your ego, and it can be very bruising. So that being said, what do they do about their career dilemma? Well, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they may have to put their hopes of picking up where they left off on the back burner for now, especially if they haven't built up the right networks and they don't have current skills. They have to make a decision on how much effort and time they want to invest in trying to reskill or rescope themselves, given that they may only have the next 5 to 7 years to work. Or they may have to reevaluate, is their target realistic? Then it's all the best practices, because this is really all you can do. You have to have a very targeted, well-aligned resume. And if you're using a resume that is not targeted to the jobs that you're applying to, you're likely going to be getting rejections left and right for the reasons that I've already spoken about. So you have to make sure that your resume speaks very clearly to the type of job that you're applying to. And I'm going to be honest, most people really struggle with this. They think they have a good resume, but when I look at them, there's a lot of issues that need to be corrected. Then one of the biggest things is leaning into networks. Now, if you've been at a company for a long period of time, I really hope that you have some closer personal relationships with other hiring managers in the industry that you work in. So if nobody knows who you are in other departments similar to yours at your major competitors, or even a couple competitors once removed, then that's a major issue with visibility. I'd be focused on trying to get more visible in my industry. But then, of course, you're going to lean into your existing networks of people that you knew in your organizations and try to parlay that into job opportunities, but likely that's not going to bear much fruit. But then you have to be building your LinkedIn networks as well. So it's all the traditional things that everybody should be doing in their job search, but I feel like it's even more amplified at this level. And at some point, you may have to get a little creative and put your ego to the side. In some cases, people are turning down job opportunities that they feel are quote unquote beneath them because they feel like they should be able to pick up where they left off. They may think, the last time I looked for a job, which was 15 or 20 years ago, I had no problem getting callbacks and I had plenty of opportunities. Problem is that this is not the same job market. This is a much more brutal job market that is very focused on, do you have the exact skill that we're looking for? And there's a lot more competition. So you're dealing with the disadvantage, plus you're dealing with a bad labor market that everybody else is dealing with. And it's just a recipe for a very difficult situation. So you may need to look at getting creative. Consider some 1099 opportunities. Look for some major consulting firms in your industry and contact them. See if they have any opportunities. Or you may want to parlay it into a little contracting business of your own. They're not necessarily easy, but you should be running these concurrently as you're doing a traditional job search. So it doesn't mean that you just give up on the career and go off and do something else, but you're doing them at the same time. Now, if you're somebody that's earlier in your career and you're wondering how to avoid this, the very best thing that you can be doing is implementing career strategy today. And it doesn't matter how far along. If you're 10 years into your career and you haven't ever seriously thought about career strategy, now is the time to start doing it. Ultimately, it boils back to being very intentional with what you do and being aware of a steady job being bad for your career. Doesn't mean that there's not value of a steady job in a bad labor market, but you have to do so with eyes wide open and a very intentional purpose of why you're staying in that role, not just because it's convenient. Now, if you're somebody that's experiencing this scenario and you're not sure what to do, I do offer some limited private one-on-one coaching. You can reach me through my website, Life After Layoff, for that. I also offer some courses that go into deep dives on all of these concepts. How to write a resume through Resume Rocket Fuel, which teaches you exactly how to write a resume for these different scenarios and circumstances, how to troubleshoot things, how to actually create the best possible resume for the job that you're applying to give yourself the best chance given your background. And then, of course, there's the networking component where we talk through how to do that through LinkedIn. The course Unlocking LinkedIn walks through that in great detail, but it covers more than just LinkedIn networking. It actually covers a lot of in-person networking as well. And to me, that's where the real value is. But of course, there's career strategy. And if you're somebody that doesn't know what to do in your career and how to find career strategy, I created the Ultimate Career Blueprint, which builds out an entire career for you and gives you a roadmap in order to figure out what's the best steps for you. It also provides you with a detailed and proven method to navigate onboarding into a new job and how to deal with corporate politics so you can move up in organizations without feeling too gross about it. Anyway, hopefully you found this video to be helpful. Hopefully this is a warning that you can take heed of no matter where you are in your career, and you can take the necessary steps to avoid it. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.